No one in that auditorium expected the quiet man in the worn navy blazer to become the center of attention that day. Parents were laughing, cameras were flashing, and students in caps and gowns filled the rows, waiting for their names to be called. It was supposed to be a proud day, the kind a father remembers for the rest of his life. But within minutes, something happened that made the entire atmosphere shift. Marcus Reed, a retired veteran, had arrived early. He chose a seat near the aisle, holding a small folded program in his hands, reading his son's name over and over as if to make the moment feel real. He had worked 2 jobs for years, sacrificed sleep, comfort, and sometimes even meals so his son could finish school. Today was not just a graduation. It was proof that every struggle had meant something, but not everyone saw him that way. 2 security guards approached him quietly at first. One leaned closer and spoke in a low voice that carried more suspicion than politeness. They questioned his seat, his presence, and then his invitation. Marcus calmly showed the printed ticket, his hands steady, his expression respectful. Still, the tone of the guards did not soften. People nearby began to notice. Conversations faded into whispers. The guards insisted he move, saying there had been a mistake. Marcus tried to explain that his son was graduating, that he had every right to be there, but the guards' patience was thin, and their voices were getting louder. The room felt different now. Eyes were turning. Phones were lowering. The celebration had begun to feel uncomfortable, tense, like a storm forming just beyond the walls. Marcus stood slowly, not because he agreed, but because he didn't want to cause a scene on the most important day of his son's life. He gathered his program, straightened his jacket, and prepared to walk toward the exit, and that was the moment the doors at the back of the auditorium opened. 6 men stepped inside, calm, composed, moving with quiet confidence. They weren't in uniform, but anyone who had ever served could recognize the posture, the awareness, the unmistakable presence of elite military professionals. They scanned the room once, and then their eyes landed on Marcus. Everything was about to change. The 6 men walked forward with purpose, not rushing, not hesitating. One of them reached Marcus first and placed a firm but respectful hand on his shoulder. The veteran looked up, confused for a moment, until recognition dawned in his eyes. They had served together, years ago, in places most people would never dare to go. They had trusted each other with their lives. Bonds like that do not fade with time. They only grow stronger. The guards, now uncertain, asked who they were and what was going on. One of the men calmly explained that Marcus Reed was not just a guest at this graduation. He was a decorated veteran who had saved lives, led missions, and earned the respect of everyone who had ever worked beside him. Their voices were steady, not angry, but firm enough to command attention. The conversation in the auditorium had completely stopped now. Even the students on stage were looking down, watching the scene unfold. One of the SEALs turned to the guards and asked a simple question. Did you check his invitation before asking him to leave? The guards exchanged uneasy glances. The answer was obvious. Marcus stood silently, uncomfortable with the attention, but the men beside him were not there to create a spectacle. They were there to make sure respect was given where it was due. A faculty member hurried over, apologizing, explaining there must have been a misunderstanding. But the room already understood what had happened. People could feel it, the shift in awareness, the realization that someone had been judged too quickly. The 6 men didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. Their presence alone silenced the entire auditorium, and then, from the side of the stage, Marcus's son saw what was happening. The young graduate stepped down from the line without thinking, ignoring the instructions of the staff, and walked straight across the floor toward his father. His cap tilted slightly as he moved, his eyes locked on Marcus, his expression filled with pride and emotion. When he reached him, he didn't say anything at first. He just hugged him, the kind of hug that says everything words cannot, the kind that carries years of sacrifice, late nights, and quiet determination. The room, still silent, watched a moment more powerful than any speech that day. One of the SEALs gently placed a hand on Marcus's back and nodded toward the stage. You should be sitting in the front, he said quietly. This time, no one argued. Marcus was escorted to a better seat, not out of pity, but out of respect. The guards stepped aside, their earlier confidence replaced by quiet humility. The ceremony resumed, but something had changed in the atmosphere. People were paying closer attention, not just to the graduates, but to the meaning of the day itself. When Marcus's son's name was finally called, the applause was louder than for anyone else. Not because of sympathy, but because the entire room understood the story behind that moment. As father and son met again after the ceremony, surrounded by friends, family, and the 6 men who had stood beside Marcus when it mattered most, there was a quiet sense of justice in the air. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the kind that restores dignity, and long after the auditorium emptied, people would remember what they had witnessed. Not the confrontation, not the tension, but the reminder that respect, once defended with courage and calm, has a way of silencing even the loudest room.